Imagine a moment so far in the future that the idea of the future itself has almost lost meaning. Not the end of a day. Not the end of a civilization. Not even the end of stars. This is the final second the universe is capable of showing us anything at all. Not because time stops, but because change does. To arrive at this moment, we have to travel far beyond familiar eras. Beyond galaxies filled with light. Beyond planets and warmth and motion. We are moving toward a universe that has grown old in the deepest possible sense. At first, time still feels normal. Stars burn. Galaxies turn slowly. Light crosses space as it always has. But as billions of years pass, the universe begins to thin. Stars die more often than they are born. Gas clouds become scarce. The raw material needed to ignite new suns slowly disappears. Eventually, the last generation of stars forms. They are dimmer than the stars before them. Long-lived. Patient. They shine quietly for trillions of years, using the final reserves of nuclear fuel. And then one by one they fade. When the last star goes dark, there is no sudden darkness. The universe has already been dim for a long time. What remains are stellar remnants. White dwarfs. Neutron stars. Black holes. These are not dead objects. They still contain energy. They still exert gravity. But they no longer create light. Space continues to expand during all of this. Not as an explosion and not into anything. The distance between everything simply grows. Galaxies drift apart until they can no longer see one another. Each island of matter becomes isolated in its own pocket of space. Eventually, even the concept of a galaxy stops making sense. Stars that once orbited together are now so far apart that they are no longer a system. They are just individual objects moving through an ever-stretching universe. As time goes on, motion becomes rarer. Collisions between objects become unlikely. Interactions slow. The universe cools. Temperature is not a substance. It is motion. And motion at every scale begins to fade. Particles still exist, but they move less. Energy differences even out. The universe drifts toward balance. This process has been happening since the beginning of time. It is called entropy. Entropy does not destroy things. It smooths them. It erases differences. Hot and cold become the same. Fast and slow become the same. Bright and dark become the same. As entropy increases, the universe becomes quieter. Not silent in the way a room becomes silent, but silent in a deeper way. There are fewer events, fewer changes, fewer moments that could be noticed by anything capable of noticing. Eventually, even black holes begin to change. For most of cosmic history, black holes were the final anchors of structure. That's powerful, persistent, but they are not eternal. Over unimaginable spans of time, black holes lose energy, very slowly. So slowly that, from a human perspective, they might as well last forever. But given enough time, they shrink. They release tiny amounts of radiation into space, a whisper of energy. And then, after spans of time longer than stars ever existed, the last black hole disappears. When that happens, there is no violence, no collapse, just one less structure in the universe. Now we are close to the last second. The universe is almost perfectly uniform. There are still particles, but they are spread so thinly that they rarely meet. There are still photons, but they are stretched to wavelengths so long that they barely carry energy at all. Nothing clusters. Nothing organizes. Nothing builds. There are no processes left that can form clocks. No repeating motions. No orbits. No cycles. Without cycles, time becomes difficult to define. Seconds no longer tick. The final second is not a dramatic instant. It is the last moment in which anything happens that is distinguishable from nothing happening at all. If you could somehow observe the universe at this point, it would look almost the same in every direction. There would be no stars to focus on, no shapes to trace, just an even, faint background of existence. Space is still there. Time is still there. But they no longer carry stories. And then, without ceremony, the final change occurs. Not a flash, not a sound, just the absence of anything new. From this point forward, the universe continues, but nothing ever meaningfully happens again. And this is what the universe looks like from the very last second. From this moment onward, the universe enters a state that is difficult to describe, because description itself relies on change. Language is built around events, around causes and effects, around before and after. But here there is almost no before and after left. Time continues, but it no longer separates moments in a useful way. There are no landmarks to pass, no transitions to notice. The universe does not feel frozen, feels settled, as though every possible rearrangement has already happened, and nothing remains that could be different. Particles still exist, but they are unimaginably far apart. The chance of two ever meeting again is so small that, for all practical purposes, it never happens. A single particle may travel for stretches of time longer than the entire age of the early universe, without encountering anything at all. Motion still exists, but it has no consequences. A particle can drift through space, but it does not collide, does not bind, does not transfer energy. Its motion changes nothing. Light still exists as well. Photons still cross the universe, but these photons are stretched thin by expansion. Their wavelengths are so long that they carry almost no energy. They are no longer visible, no longer warm. They are simply gentle ripples in the fabric of space, so faint that they blend almost perfectly into the background. There is no darkness in the way darkness once existed. Darkness once meant the absence of light against a backdrop of stars. Now there is no backdrop. There is no contrast. The universe is not dark or bright. It is uniform. If awareness could exist here, it would not see emptiness. It would see sameness. Every direction would look like every other direction. Not because there is nothing, but because what exists is evenly spread beyond distinction. This is the consequence of entropy reaching its maximum. Entropy is not chaos. It is equality. Every region of space has the same energy, the same temperature, the same properties. Without differences, nothing flows. Heat cannot move because there is nowhere warmer or colder. Particles cannot organize because there is no gradient to guide them. Information cannot be processed because processing requires contrast. The universe has reached equilibrium. In earlier eras, equilibrium was temporary. Local pockets of order formed and dissolved. Stars burned because their cores were hotter than their surroundings. Planets formed because gravity created density differences. Life existed because energy flowed from one place to another. All of that depended on imbalance. Here, imbalance is gone. This does not feel like an ending. Feels like a conclusion. Not a collapse, but a resolution. If we could slow time even further, stretching moments into near infinity, we would notice that the universe does not resist this state. There is no tension. Nothing is trying to happen. Space continues to expand, but expansion itself no longer changes anything meaningful. As distances grow, the universe remains the same everywhere. Bigger but not different. The idea of location loses relevance. There is no center, no edge. Any point could be considered the same as any other. Here, the universe is no longer a stage for events. It is simply existence continuing without narrative. The laws of physics still apply. They have not broken, but they have nothing left to act on. Gravity still exists, but there are no clumps to pull together. Electromagnetism still exists, but there are no charges close enough to interact. The strong and weak forces still exist, but there are no complex structures left for them to shape. The laws remain, but the story is over. If the early universe was a symphony, this is the final sustained note, held so long that it becomes indistinguishable from silence. There is no observer here, no eye to watch, no mind to interpret. Observation itself requires interaction, and interaction has ended. The universe does not know it is quiet. It does not experience peace or emptiness. Those are human ideas. From the universe's perspective, this state is simply allowed. It is the most natural outcome. If we try to imagine how long this state lasts, we encounter a problem. Duration requires events. Without events, time cannot be counted. The universe does not move towards something else after this. It does not decay further in any meaningful way. This is not a phase that leads to another phase. It is the asymptote, the place time approaches but never leaves. And yet, even here, nothing is truly zero. Quantum mechanics tells us that perfect stillness is impossible. Even in the lowest energy state, tiny fluctuations remain. Brief, subtle variations in energy flicker in and out of existence. They do not build. They do not accumulate. They appear and they vanish, like thoughts that never form. These fluctuations are the final motions of reality. Not enough to restart complexity. Not enough to create structure. Just reminders that existence has not been erased. The universe has not ended. It has finished. From the inside, this looks like nothing happening. From the outside, if such a perspective could exist, it would look like a universe that has fully expressed every possibility it ever had. No more pressure. No more urgency. Just continuity. This is the last second, not because it is followed by darkness, but because it is followed by an unchanging forever. A forever without milestones, without memories, without anticipation. If the beginning of the universe was explosive and bright, this ending is gentle and quiet, not a disappearance, a rest, and the universe remains here, not waiting, not watching, not moving toward anything else, simply being. If we remain here, within this state, it becomes clear that the idea of an ending was always something we projected onto the universe. What has truly ended is complexity. The universe has not been destroyed. It has not vanished. It has not collapsed into nothing. It has reached a condition where nothing new can emerge. Earlier in time, the universe was full of pathways. Energy could flow from one place to another. Matter could gather, separate, and rearrange. Every moment created new possibilities. Here, possibility itself has thinned to nearly zero. The universe is still governed by probability, but the probabilities no longer lead anywhere interesting. A particle may fluctuate slightly in position. A faint ripple may pass through space. But these events do not connect. They do not compound. They do not lead to further change. They are isolated, self-contained, and quickly smoothed away. Cause and effect still exist in principle. But causes no longer produce meaningful effects. Nothing builds upon anything else. If we imagine drifting through this universe, there would be no sense of motion. Movement requires reference points. Without stars, without galaxies, without structure, there is nothing to move relative to. A particle can travel, but it cannot tell that it has traveled. Distance loses its meaning when every location is the same. In earlier eras, space had texture. Dense regions and empty regions. Bright zones and dark zones. Here space is smooth. Not smooth like glass, but smooth like a perfectly even fog extending forever. There is no horizon because there is nothing to obscure or reveal. Looking outward does not show distance. It shows repetition. The same faint background endlessly. Time behaves similarly. Without events, time does not feel like a flow. Feels like a condition. The universe is not passing through moments. It is resting in one. This is why the final second is not sharp. It is not a boundary you cross. It is a threshold beyond which time stops producing stories. Earlier, the universe could be described as young or old. Now those words no longer apply. Age implies change over time. Here, nothing ages. Nothing evolves. Nothing decays in a meaningful way. The universe has become timeless, not because time is gone, but because time no longer matters. If intelligence were somehow preserved into this era, it would not experience boredom. Boredom requires expectation. There is nothing to wait for here. No next moment that differs from the last. Awareness itself would dissolve without input, without variation, without information. Consciousness requires contrast. In perfect uniformity there is nothing to notice. This is why observers cannot exist here. Not because they are forbidden, but because the conditions that allow observation have vanished. Memory requires change. Learning requires surprise. Thought requires distinction. In this universe, distinction is gone. The laws of physics remain written into reality, but they are like rules of a game with no players and no moves. They describe what could happen, but nothing ever does. Even gravity, the great architect of structure, has nothing left to work with. Without dense regions, gravity produces no motion. It is present but silent. Electromagnetism still defines how charges would interact. But charges are too far apart to ever meet. The strong force still binds particles, but there are no complex nuclei left to bind. Everything that could be assembled has already been assembled and undone. This state is sometimes described as the heat death of the universe. But the word death suggests loss. This is not loss. It is completion. Every gradient has flattened. Every imbalance has resolved. The universe has reached its most stable configuration. Nothing pushes against anything else. There is no tension left to release. If we compare this to earlier cosmic eras, the difference is not darkness versus light. It is motion versus rest. The early universe was dynamic. Energy rushed. Matter collided. Space churned with activity. This universe is still. Not frozen, but settled. Like a lake long after all ripples have faded. If you wait here for an eternity, nothing will greet you. Not because eternity is short, but because waiting itself has lost meaning. There is no future event toward which waiting could point. Forever does not stretch forward. It simply remains. This is the quiet truth of the last second. It is not dramatic. It is not tragic. It is gentle. The universe does not mourn its earlier brilliance. It does not remember stars or galaxies. Memory requires persistence of patterns, and patterns are gone. From the universe's perspective, this state is enough. It does not ask for more. And so the universe continues unchanged, not for a while, but without end. Forever is a word that once carried weight. It implied endurance, persistence, something lasting against change. Here, forever is lighter. It does not stretch. It does not loom. It simply is. In this state, the universe is not moving toward anything, and it is not moving away from anything. There is no destination ahead, and no past pulling from behind. Time exists as a dimension, but without events, it has no direction. Earlier time was shaped by change. Stars marked eras. Galaxies traced history. Now time has no markers. If a trillion years pass, the universe does not look older. If a quadrillion years pass, nothing looks different. The universe does not accumulate wear. It does not drift. It does not progress. This is not because time has stopped, but because the universe has no remaining degrees of freedom. Everything that could relax has relaxed. Everything that could spread has spread. Every difference that could be erased has been erased. In earlier eras, space had texture because energy was unevenly distributed. Hot regions and cold regions. Dense and sparse. Those differences drove everything that happened. Stars ignited because gravity pulled matter together. Light existed because atoms dropped from higher energy states to lower ones. Life existed because energy flowed through complex systems. All of that required contrast. Contrast is gone. Here, every region of space is nearly identical to every other. Not approximately. Not statistically. Effectively. If you could compare two distant points, you would not find meaningful differences. There is no signal that distinguishes one place from another. The universe has become translationally silent. Earlier, expansion mattered because it separated structures. Here, expansion continues, but there are no structures left to separate. Space grows, but nothing notices. distance increases, but distance no longer has consequence. A particle drifting alone in this universe could travel for spans of time that once contained entire civilizations. And yet nothing would mark that journey. No collision, no interaction, motion without story. Energy too has become abstract. There is still energy in the universe, but it is evenly spread. Energy differences are what allow work to be done. Without differences, energy cannot act. It exists, but it is inert. The universe contains no engines, no gradients, no flows. The idea of cause becomes thin here. Earlier, one event led to another. A collapse led to a star led to planets, a planet led to chemistry. Here, an event does not lead anywhere. A quantum fluctuation appears, then disappears. It does not cascade. It does not amplify. It does not leave a trace. These fluctuations are the final signs of motion, but they are self-contained. They do not accumulate into memory. Memory requires persistence. Nothing persists long enough to be remembered. If awareness somehow flickered into existence here, it would vanish just as quietly. Without input, without difference, there is nothing to sustain it. This universe is not hostile to life. It is indifferent. The conditions that once allowed life simply no longer exist. Not because they were destroyed, but because they were temporary arrangements in a universe that prefers balance. This preference is not intention. It is tendency. The universe follows the easiest path, and the easiest path is toward uniformity. In this sense, the final second was never an accident. It was always the destination implied by the beginning. The early universe was hot, dense, and uneven. That unevenness made everything possible. But unevenness cannot last forever. Every difference eventually smooths out. This is not a flaw. It is a feature. The universe explores complexity briefly, then releases it. Stars were a phase. Galaxies were a phase. Even matter itself may be a phase. What remains is simpler, more stable, less expressive, and yet it still exists. Existence does not require drama. It does not require witnesses. It does not require meaning. The universe is content to persist without story. This is why the final second feels less like an ending, and more like a quiet acceptance. Nothing is taken away suddenly. Nothing is denied. Everything that could happen has already had time to happen. All questions that could be asked have already been answered by silence. If the beginning of time was a question, this is the answer. Not spoken, not written, simply present. And the universe remains here, not counting moments, not anticipating change, not remembering what came before, just existing evenly, endlessly, within the calm stillness of its last meaningful second. And as we do, the language itself begins to slow because there is less left to describe. In a universe where nothing changes, explanation becomes repetition, and repetition becomes rhythm. Here, ideas do not advance. They circle. They return slightly altered, like the same thought revisited after a long silence. The universe does not mind this. It has all the time there is. In this state, there is no distinction between now and later. Later implies difference. Later implies arrival. Nothing arrives here. Every moment resembles every other moment so closely that they blend together. If you tried to mark the passage of time, you would find no anchor, no decay, no buildup, no motion that leads anywhere. Time continues to exist as a dimension, but without events, it has no texture. It is like a perfectly smooth surface, without grooves or edges. Earlier, time carried pressure. Stars had lifetimes. Galaxies evolved. There was urgency built into physics itself. Here, urgency is gone. Nothing is running out. Nothing is beginning. The universe is not waiting for something to happen, because there is nothing left that can. Even randomness has softened. Randomness once meant surprise, unexpected outcomes, variation. Now, randomness produces only tiny, isolated flickers that cancel themselves out. There is no chain reaction, no accumulation. Randomness still exists, but it has no leverage. It cannot change the overall state. If we stay here long enough, the mind begins to notice something subtle. This state does not feel empty, it feels complete. Emptiness suggests absence. This is presence without emphasis. Everything that exists is spread so evenly that nothing stands out. In earlier eras, the universe was defined by contrast. Light against dark, matter against space. Here, contrast has dissolved, not erased, but neutralized. This makes the universe difficult to imagine, because imagination relies on boundaries, edges, transitions. Here there are none. The universe has become boundaryless, not infinite in size, but infinite in sameness. If we consider the idea of meaning here, it changes shape. Meaning once came from relationships, from cause and effect, from memory and expectation. Without those, meaning does not disappear. It simply no longer organizes experience. The universe does not need meaning to exist. Meaning was something complexity created temporarily. It arose when systems were capable of caring about outcomes. Here there are no outcomes. Everything that could resolve has resolved. This is why the final second is so difficult to place. It is not a moment you pass through. It is a condition you arrive at and never leave. The universe does not cross a finish line. It settles. If we try to imagine sound here, there is none. Sound requires vibration through matter. Matter is too sparse. If we try to imagine light, there is none that can be seen. Photons still exist, but they are stretched beyond visibility. If we try to imagine warmth, there is none. Temperature differences are gone, but existence remains. Space is still extended. Time is still allowed. The laws of physics are still written into reality, unchanging. They simply have nothing left to sculpt. This universe is not fragile. It cannot break. There is no structure to collapse, no balance to upset. It is stable in the deepest possible sense. If eternity passes, nothing wears down, nothing erodes, nothing fades further. This is not decay. Decay implies motion towards something else. This is rest. In earlier times, rest was temporary, a pause between changes. Here, rest is permanent. The universe has found its lowest energy state, not locally, globally. There is nowhere lower to go, no direction left to fall. If the universe could feel, this would not be sadness. Sadness requires loss. Nothing is lost here. Everything that existed has simply finished expressing itself. Stars expressed fusion. Galaxies expressed gravity. Life expressed chemistry and information. Now the universe expresses equilibrium. This expression is quiet, but it is not nothing. It is the final form. If we remain here long enough, even questions begin to lose shape. Why requires alternatives? How requires process? Both fade. The universe does not ask why it exists. It exists because existence is allowed. And so it continues, not as a story, not as a sequence, as a condition that does not need narration. And yet we are still here, observing from outside time, describing what cannot be witnessed from within. This perspective itself is temporary. Eventually, even the act of imagining this state has no foothold. Thought relies on contrast, on change, on difference. Here thought would dissolve. The same way ripples dissolve on a still lake, gently, without resistance. The universe does not object. It does not react. It does not respond. It simply remains. And this remaining does not grow old. It does not become heavier. It does not drift toward another ending. This is the last meaningful state. Everything beyond it is the same state continuing, not repeated, not renewed, just ongoing. This is why the universe does not end. It concludes. And that conclusion does not require closure. There is no final image, no final sound, no final moment. There is only this state, extended without variation, and it does not need to be marked, because nothing ever interrupts it again. The universe continues quietly, without anticipation, without expectation. Nothing interrupts its rhythm because there is no rhythm left. There is no motion that matters, no energy differences to drive change, no matter close enough to interact. Time flows, but it is not experienced as before. Earlier, seconds were defined by events. Moments were distinguished by difference. Now, without difference, time is simply a coordinate, a dimension that exists but has no narrative. A particle could drift across unimaginable distances for trillions of years, and nothing would note its passage. It leaves no mark, no trace, no interaction. Photons drift as well, stretched by the expansion of space. Their energy is so low that they cannot warm, illuminate, or affect anything. Space is smooth, even, and uniform. There is no horizon, no edge, no center. Every direction looks the same. Every point is equivalent to every other. Earlier, contrast drove complexity. Stars formed where matter concentrated. Planets appeared where gravity collected material. Life arose where chemistry could flow. Now, contrast has vanished. Temperature differences are gone. Density differences are gone. Energy differences are gone. Every property that could create change has evened out. Even the smallest fluctuations are isolated. A quantum particle may flicker briefly, but it does not influence anything else. It cannot accumulate. It cannot trigger structure or pattern. It does not build. It does not destroy. The universe has reached maximum entropy. This is not destruction. This is stability. It is not silence in the sense of emptiness. It is silence in the sense of balance. Every component exists evenly spread in equilibrium. If awareness existed here, it would not feel emptiness. It would feel completeness. There is no past to compare. No future to anticipate. There is only this. Only the state of perfect uniformity. The laws of physics still govern the universe, but they cannot produce complexity. Gravity cannot collapse anything further because there is nothing dense to collapse. Electromagnetism cannot act because there are no charges near enough to interact. Nuclear forces cannot bind anything because there is nothing left to bind. All interactions that could occur have already occurred, or are now so rare they do not matter. Even randomness is constrained. Quantum fluctuations exist, but they cannot cascade. They cannot build into structure or pattern. They appear briefly, then fade without leaving a trace. They are the faintest motions in a universe otherwise completely still. The universe has entered a state where everything that could happen has happened. All that remains is existence itself. No story, no observer, no difference. If we step back in imagination, the entire cosmos now is like a vast ocean of calm, infinite and featureless. No currents, no waves, no turbulence. Just extension. Just duration. Just the stillness of everything that remains. Forever continues here, but it is not heavy. It is not oppressive. It is not lonely. There is nothing to miss, nothing to anticipate, nothing to change. It is the simplest possible universe that still exists. It is the endpoint of all motion, all interaction, all history. And yet it continues. Not as a final gasp, not as a collapse, not as a moment of silence punctuated by an event. It simply is. No growth, no decay, no difference. The universe has reached the ultimate equilibrium. It will persist in this state without end. And there is no force that can alter it. It has no further destination, no further story. It is complete. If we imagine being present here not as matter or consciousness, but as awareness itself, we would notice something profound. Not fear, not awe, not sadness. We would notice absence of change, perfect balance. The universe does not act. It does not wait. It does not resist. It simply exists. All moments are equivalent. All space is equivalent. All energy is evenly spread. All structure has dissolved. And so the universe remains infinitely, evenly, silently, forever unchanging, forever complete, forever